probably one of the most recognizable owls in the world. And the irony of the whole thing is, they're also one of the most scarce owls around in the state of New York. There hasn't been a barn owl there's 2 or 3 pockets, according to Audubon, of barn owls. This is a barn owl in New York. And about 20 years ago, I became friends with a veterinarian. He owns a wildlife rescue facility, and he was breeding barn owls and he was releasing them.
Oh no!
And I actually was really interested in what he was doing, and I said, I want a couple of barn owls. And so I bought my first couple of barn owls off of him, and I said, and one of the members of my board, because there's about 12 wildlife rehabilitators that work with me in my network, said, why do you have a barn owl in what we're doing? There is never going to be a barn owl in central New York, and they're basically extinct in New York, and it's not native and we shouldn't have it in our shows. And I said, well, that's the great thing about being the director of the organization, is I can do whatever the hell I want, number one. And number two, I said, before I'm dead, I said, my kids will see this owl again. If you drive around here and you look at these old barns, and they have those holes in the side of the old barns, they call them martin holes. I did my homework on this. I do my homework on everything. And those holes in the side of old Dutch barns, they're called martin holes. And I was like, martins? The purple martins? Like, they got the really nice houses with like condos they put close to rivers. And I'm like, that doesn't make sense to me at all. Some people call them pigeonholes. No. My dad was poor growing up. He ate pigeon. They wouldn't have put holes in the side of their barns for pigeons. They would have closed the barn doors and caught them and eaten them. And you have 7 to 10 kids, and you're threshing the grain that you're growing in the fields this time of year in the middle of your Dutch barn, and you got rats and mice and other things that eat a lot of grain. And you get a pair of these. When I was doing my homework on barn owls, there was a pair of barn owls. Now these are the bunny rabbits of the falcon world. There was a pair of barn owls that they put a camera on. And those pair of barn owls, most birds of prey have 1, 2 chicks and call it good. And 75% of those chicks die in the first year of life. Migration in winter is tough. Barn owls have 7 to 11 chicks in a clutch. And if they have proper conditions and good food, they'll re-nest again in the same summer and have 7 to 11 chicks again in the same summer. The video or the study that I read on barn owls, when I was trying to figure out barn owls, they had a pair of barn owls. They had 22 chicks in a summer. They killed over 20,000 mice. And the interesting thing with the study, because they had a camera on it, and some poor college kid had to count how many they brought. And it was only like 300 rats. It was like half a dozen moles, voles, and it was almost exclusively field mice that they were eating. They killed over 20,000 field mice to feed their 22 chicks in the summer that they fledged. There's actually a house in Germany where they've had barn owls living in the attic for over 800 years, and they've been documenting how many chicks the owls had every year. I have 5 barn owls. My dominant pair has a nesting box. I had another pair up this year and say, there's no house for us. And I said, there's no house for you because you're not supposed to be breeding. So they laid eggs on the ground. They hatched the chicks on the ground, and they raised them on the ground. It's unheard of. It's unheard of. And I was stupefied by the whole thing. And all of the people that I know that know, and I'm like, have you ever heard of barn owls laying eggs on the ground, have chicks on the ground, and raising them on the ground because they didn't give them a nesting box? And they're like, no. It means my birds are really happy. And I'll take their chicks and I'll probably overwinter them. In the spring, when the conditions are right, I'll release them and try to get a native population going. Now, so there's a couple pockets of barn owls in New York State. No one saw a barn owl in New York State in 75 years. What year was it we went to Africa, honey? 2010, 10 years ago, in a silo, in Cobleskill. The same board member that had a problem with me getting invested into barn owls, which was a losing proposition, was covering for me while I was in Africa with my wife. And there was a call for a farmer that had a owl trapped in a silo in Cobleskill. Now, we do 500 to 1,000 animals a year. We don't go to your house to get them. You have to bring them to us. We're busy. And the farmer said, I'm putting silage in that silo. If the owl's not out of there, by the time I put silage in the silo, it's dead. So she went over. She climbed in the silo. It was a barn owl. This is 10 years ago. And I've been into barn owls for like 15 years. 10 years ago, she said, oh my God. And so when I got back in the country, I turned on my phone and I called her. My kids had already tipped me off. And I called her up and I said, any interesting calls while I was gone? And she was like, you already know. She was like, I don't know how you know these things. And she's like, yeah, we picked up a barn owl in Cobleskill. And she said, completely unheard of. Okay, calm down. Nope, not your box.